Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching the stars through the main viewport. The ship had been exploring space for 3 months now, and they had found nothing but empty planets and dead systems. Jake was a big man, with short brown hair and scars on his hands from his time as a Marine before becoming a ship captain. He hoped today would be different. Dr. Lisa Hayes looked up from her science station. She was young, with blonde hair tied back and bright blue, eyes that always seemed excited about new discoveries. Lisa had spent years studying alien life forms, even though humans had never met any real aliens before. She believed they were out there somewhere waiting to be found. The ship moved slowly through the Kepler system, scanning planets and recording data. Communications officer Ryan Parker sat at his station monitoring all frequencies for any signs of intelligent life. Ryan was thin and wore glasses, and had been working with radio signals since he was a teenager. He knew every type of signal humans used and hoped to find something completely new. Chief Engineer Carlos Martinez worked in the engine room, keeping their new experimental jump drive running smoothly. Carlos was older than most of the crew, with gray hair and steady hands that could fix anything. The jump drive was still being tested and could only make short jumps, but it was the fastest way humans had ever traveled through space. Jake walked over to the navigation station where Lieutenant Amy Foster was plotting their course. Amy had red hair and freckles and came from a family of pilots. She was the best navigator in the fleet and could find her way through any star system. The crew trusted her to keep them safe and get them home. Suddenly, Ryan jumped up from his station. His face was pale and his hands were shaking as he adjusted his headset. He had been monitoring space for hours and finally heard something that was not human-made. The signal was strong and clear and definitely artificial. Jake moved quickly to Ryan's station. The sound coming through the speakers was unlike anything they had ever heard. It had patterns and rhythms that suggested intelligence, but it was completely alien. Ryan worked frantically to analyze the signal and determine where it was coming from. Lisa ran over from her science station with excitement in her eyes. She had dreamed of this moment her entire life, and now it was finally happening. First contact with an alien species was about to change everything for humanity. She started recording everything and preparing the contact protocols they had practiced hundreds of times. The signal was coming from a large fleet of ships approaching from the edge of the solar system. Amy quickly calculated their speed and trajectory. The alien ships were moving faster than anything humans had ever built, and they would arrive at the horizon's position within hours. Jake called all senior officers to the bridge. This was the moment that would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. He had read every first contact procedure and studied every possible scenario, but now that it was really happening, he felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The alien fleet consisted of 12 massive ships that were dark gray and covered with sharp angles and weapon ports. Each ship was 3 times larger than the horizon and moved with perfect precision through space. Their technology was clearly more advanced than anything humans possessed. Lisa activated the universal translator and began broadcasting standard first contact messages in mathematics and basic symbols. The response came quickly in perfect English, which surprised everyone on the bridge. The aliens had been monitoring human communications and had learned their language. A large reptilian face appeared on the main screen. The alien had green scales and yellow eyes and spoke with a deep voice that echoed through the bridge. He introduced himself as Fleet Commander Vexathara of the Zephyrian Empire. His manner was cold and arrogant as he looked at the human crew with obvious disdain. Vexathara demanded that the humans submit to immediate surrender and accept their place as subjects of the Zephyrian Empire. He explained that his people had conquered dozens of worlds and that resistance was futile. The Zephyrians had scanned the human ship and determined that humans were weak and could not possibly oppose them. Jake tried to negotiate and explain that humans wanted peaceful relations with all alien species. He offered to establish diplomatic contact between their governments and work toward mutual understanding. Vexathara laughed at this suggestion and called humans soft creatures who could not understand the realities of galactic power. To demonstrate Zephyrian superiority, Vexathara ordered the destruction of a nearby human research station. The station had 200 civilians, including scientists and their families who were studying the planets in the system. Jake watched helplessly as alien weapons turned the station into burning debris in seconds. Lisa cried as she watched innocent people die for no reason other than alien arrogance. Ryan tried desperately to contact the station, but there were no survivors. Amy plotted an escape course while Carlos prepared the jump drive for emergency activation. Jake realized that peaceful first contact was impossible with these aliens. The Zephyrians had decided that humans were weak and worthless, and nothing would change their minds except force. He ordered battle stations and prepared to defend his ship and crew. The Zephyrian fleet opened fire on the horizon with weapons that lit up space like small suns. The human shields held for a few seconds before failing completely. Jake ordered emergency jump as alien fire tore through the ship's hull. Carlos activated the experimental drive just as the bridge started to lose atmosphere. The horizon jumped, away from the battle, leaving the destroyed research station behind. Jake looked at his damaged ship and wounded crew, and realized that humanity was now at war with an enemy that considered them beneath notice. The aliens thought humans were weak and easy to defeat, but they were about to learn otherwise. Jake recorded a message to send to Earth as soon as they were safe. His voice was steady despite the destruction he had witnessed. He told Earth Command that first contact had failed and that the Zephyrian Empire had declared war on humanity. He ended the message with a warning that would prove prophetic in the days to come. The aliens had made their first mistake by underestimating human determination and creativity. They would soon discover that weakness and strength could look very different depending on who was doing the looking. President Amanda Foster sat in the emergency meeting room, deep under the White House bunker, watching the footage from Captain Morrison's ship. The images showed the destruction of the research station and the alien fleet that had appeared from nowhere. Amanda was a former military officer herself and understood immediately that humanity faced its greatest threat ever. General Kevin Brooks studied the tactical data with his staff officers. Kevin was a tall man with gray hair who had spent 40 years in the military fighting wars across Earth. He had never seen weapons like the ones the aliens used or ships that moved so fast through space. The enemy technology was centuries ahead of anything humans possessed. Admiral Susan Clark commanded the Earth Defense Fleet from her headquarters in orbit above the planet. Susan had short black hair and steel-gray eyes that missed nothing when analyzing enemy capabilities. Her ships were the best humanity had built, but they looked like toys compared to the massive Zephyrian vessels. Dr. Nathan Cross ran the Human Military Research Division and was responsible for developing new weapons and tactics. Nathan was young for such an important job, but his mind worked differently than most people. He saw patterns and possibilities that others missed and had a reputation for unconventional thinking. The alien message had been broadcast to every human world, demanding complete surrender within 30 days. Vexithara appeared on screens across the galaxy, explaining that resistance was futile and that humans should accept their fate as subjects of a superior species. His words were meant to terrify, but they had the opposite effect on many humans. Colonel Amy Rodriguez commanded the Special Forces Training Center, where elite soldiers learned to fight in impossible situations. Amy was small but incredibly tough, with scars from dozens of battles. She understood that conventional military tactics would not work against an enemy with such advanced technology. Lieutenant Commander Paul Turner worked with the engineering teams, trying to understand Zephyrian technology from the debris collected after the first battle. Paul was brilliant with machines and could take apart any device to figure out how it worked. The alien technology was unlike anything humans had seen, but it followed logical principles. Engineer Samantha Lee helped Paul analyze the alien weapons and shields, looking for weaknesses they could exploit. Samantha had designed most of the systems on human warships and knew every strength and limitation of their technology. She believed that every machine had flaws that could be found with enough study. The first reports came in from the outer colonies where Zephyrian forces had begun their invasion. New Geneva fell within hours as the alien fleet overwhelmed the small defense force. The colonists had no chance against weapons that could destroy entire cities from space. Titan Base tried to fight back, but their missiles and energy weapons barely scratched the alien shields. The Zephyrian ships landed troops that moved through the colony like unstoppable machines. The few survivors reported that the aliens seemed puzzled by humans who kept fighting even when defeat was certain. Governor Pete Collins of Titan Base sent a final message before the communication array was destroyed. Pete was an old man who had helped build the colony from nothing and refused to abandon it to aliens. His last words were broadcast across human space and became a rallying cry for resistance. Dr. Cross studied the battle reports looking for patterns in Zephyrian tactics and behavior. The aliens followed predictable military doctrine using overwhelming force to crush opposition quickly. They expected enemies to surrender when faced with superior technology and seemed confused by humans who continued fighting. Amy Rodriguez began training programs that focused on guerrilla warfare and asymmetric tactics. Traditional military formations would be suicide against Zephyrian technology, but small groups using hit-and-run attacks might have a chance. She recruited volunteers from every human world who were willing to fight against impossible odds. The civilian population reacted with a mixture of fear and anger as news of the alien invasion spread. Some people called for immediate surrender to save human lives, while others demanded total war against the invaders. Most fell somewhere in between wanting to fight but terrified of the consequences. President Foster addressed the United Earth Assembly explaining that humanity had no choice but to resist the Zephyrian Empire. She knew that surrender meant slavery or extinction for the human race. The vote was close, but the Assembly authorized full military mobilization for the coming war. Admiral Clark began moving the Earth Defense Fleet to intercept the advancing alien forces. Her ships were outnumbered and outgunned, but they were crewed by humans who understood what they were fighting for. She planned to make the aliens pay for every system they conquered. Paul Turner made the first breakthrough in understanding alien technology when he discovered that Zephyrian shields operated on rotating frequencies. The shields were nearly invulnerable, but they had brief windows of weakness that could be exploited with precise timing. The information was immediately classified and sent to all human military units. Samantha Lee worked on modifications to human weapons that might penetrate alien defenses. The project required new materials and manufacturing techniques that pushed human technology to its limits. She coordinated with factories across human space to begin production of the new weapons. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian Empire continued its methodical conquest of human colonies. Their tactics never varied as they assumed human resistance would collapse once the cost became too high. Vexithara sent regular reports to his superiors describing the weak human defenses and predicting quick victory. The aliens made their second major mistake by treating all human worlds the same way. They used identical tactics against every target and never adapted their approach based on local conditions. This predictability would eventually become a weakness that humans could exploit. Dr. Cross compiled intelligence reports from across the war zone, looking for insights into Zephyrian psychology and behavior. The aliens seemed to view war as a simple equation of superior technology defeating inferior technology. They had never encountered an enemy that fought in ways their computers could not predict. Amy Rodriguez graduated the first class of guerrilla fighters trained in unconventional warfare techniques. These soldiers would be deployed to occupied worlds where they would organize resistance movements among the civilian population. Their job was not to win battles, but to make the occupation as costly as possible for the aliens. The war was about to enter a new phase as human forces prepared for battles that would determine the fate of their species. The aliens still believed they were fighting weak creatures who would eventually surrender, but they were about to discover that humans became more dangerous when cornered, not less. Admiral Susan Clark led the Earth Defense Fleet into battle against the advancing Zephyrian forces near the Jupiter system. Her ships moved in perfect formation, using tactics that had been tested in countless simulations. The human fleet looked impressive, but everyone knew they were facing an enemy with superior technology. The battle began exactly as the aliens expected, with human ships firing missiles and energy weapons at maximum range. The Zephyrian shields absorbed the attacks easily, while their return fire cut through human defenses like paper. 3 human destroyers were destroyed in the first exchange with no damage to the alien fleet. Captain Jake Morrison watched the main battle from his position commanding a small strike force of experimental ships. Jake had been promoted after surviving first contact, and now led a group of volunteers flying ships that barely held together. His mission was different from the main fleet and much more dangerous. The human fleet appeared to retreat after losing several ships to overwhelming alien firepower. Admiral Clark ordered a fighting withdrawal that looked like a standard military tactic to preserve her remaining forces. The Zephyrians pursued confidently, expecting the humans to continue running until they could be destroyed completely. While the main battle drew Zephyrian attention, teams of human special forces were already moving through occupied colonies, using tactics the aliens had never seen before. Sergeant Danny Walsh led a squad of guerrilla fighters through the ruins of New Geneva, where they had been hiding for weeks. Danny was a small man with quick reflexes who had grown up hunting in the mountains of Earth. He understood camouflage and stealth better than any soldier in the human military. His team moved like ghosts through alien-occupied territory, striking supply convoys and communication centers. Lieutenant Rebecca Stone commanded another guerrilla unit operating on Titan Base, where the civilian population had been enslaved by Zephyrian occupation forces. Rebecca had been a police officer before the war and knew how to blend in with crowds and gather intelligence. Her people looked like ordinary colonists but carried hidden weapons. The aliens had established predictable patrol routes and security procedures that made sense for controlling a defeated population. They never imagined that the humans would continue fighting after their military forces had been destroyed. The Zephyrians viewed guerrilla warfare as dishonorable and beneath civilized species. Dr. Nathan Cross worked in a secret laboratory developing biological weapons specifically designed to target Zephyrian physiology. Nathan had studied the alien genetic structure from tissue samples recovered after battles. He discovered that Zephyrians were vulnerable to certain Earth bacteria that were harmless to humans. Scientist Helen Adams helped Nathan create modified viruses that would affect Zephyrian nervous systems, causing confusion and disorientation without killing them immediately. The weapons were designed to spread through alien ranks, slowly making them unreliable in combat situations. Major Alex Thompson planned the most dangerous mission of the war by attempting to infiltrate a Zephyrian command ship. Alex was an expert in zero-gravity combat who had trained for years in boarding actions against human pirates. Attacking an alien warship was far beyond anything he had ever attempted. Computer specialist Greg Johnson had been a civilian hacker before the war started, but his skills were perfect for the military mission Alex was planning. Greg understood computer systems better than anyone in the human fleet and had been studying captured Zephyrian technology for months. The infiltration team used a captured alien shuttle to approach the command ship during a shift change when security was temporarily reduced. Alex and his soldiers wore stolen Zephyrian uniforms that barely fit human bodies, but provided enough disguise to get them past automated sensors. Greg carried a computer virus hidden in what appeared to be a standard data storage device. The virus was designed not to destroy Zephyrian systems, but to introduce small errors and delays that would accumulate over time. The aliens would never notice the problems until it was too late. The team fought their way through the alien ship using weapons and tactics that confused the Zephyrian defenders. Humans moved and fought differently than any species the aliens had encountered before. Alex and his soldiers seemed to ignore tactical logic and made decisions based on instinct rather than analysis. Greg reached the main computer core and uploaded his virus while Alex held off alien security forces with grenades and automatic weapons. The fighting was close and brutal with no room for sophisticated tactics. Humans had advantages in hand-to-hand combat that their technology could not provide. The infiltration team escaped just before Zephyrian reinforcements arrived, but the damage was already done. The virus began spreading through the alien computer network, introducing random failures and communication breakdowns. Equipment that had worked perfectly for centuries suddenly became unreliable. Meanwhile, the guerrilla teams on occupied worlds intensified their attacks on alien supply lines and administrative centers. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy that appeared everywhere and nowhere, using weapons and tactics that defied military logic. Danny Walsh's team destroyed a major ammunition depot using explosives made from common chemicals found in any farming colony. The aliens had never considered that agricultural supplies could be turned into weapons by desperate humans. Their security focused on military threats, not improvised devices. Rebecca Stone organized civilian resistance, networks that passed intelligence about alien movements and weaknesses. The colonists appeared to cooperate with their occupiers during the day, but worked for the resistance at night. Information flowed through hidden channels that the aliens could not detect or stop. Dr. Cross deployed his biological weapons through water supplies and air circulation systems in alien facilities. The Zephyrian soldiers began experiencing equipment malfunctions and communication errors without understanding that they were being affected by human-designed pathogens. The aliens started making mistakes they had never made before as the virus and biological weapons affected their judgment and coordination. Fleet Commander Vexathara received increasingly confused reports from his field commanders, who could not explain why their superior technology was failing at critical moments. Admiral Clark used these failures to launch surprise attacks on isolated Zephyrian units that had become separated from their main forces. Human ships that had appeared defeated suddenly struck from unexpected directions using modified weapons designed by Paul Turner and Samantha Lee. The war was turning into something the Zephyrians had never experienced before. They were fighting an enemy that seemed to grow stronger when defeated and more creative when cornered. Their military computers could not analyze human tactics because humans did not follow logical patterns. Captain Morrison received new orders to prepare for the largest human operation of the war. The plan would require every ship and soldier humanity could gather for an attack that looked like suicide but served a hidden purpose. The aliens were about to learn that human weakness was actually their greatest strength. Fleet Commander Vexathara stood in his command center watching reports flood in from across the war zone. His perfect invasion plan was falling apart as human resistance intensified rather than collapsed. The Imperial Council demanded explanations for failures that should have been impossible against such weak opponents. Admiral Jake Morrison now commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled for Operation Last Stand. The mission appeared to be a desperate final assault against the main Zephyrian battle group, but Jake knew the real purpose was far more subtle. Every ship captain understood they might not survive, but they also knew their sacrifice could save humanity. The human fleet moved directly toward the alien stronghold with no attempt at stealth or deception. The attack looked exactly like what defeated species always tried when facing extinction. Vexathara was confident that this would be the final battle that ended human resistance forever. Special Agent Katie Miller worked behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence about Zephyrian command structures and battle protocols. Katie had been a spy before the war and understood how to blend in with any population. She looked like an ordinary refugee, but carried information that could change the course of the entire conflict. Katie discovered that the Zephyrians followed rigid military procedures that never varied regardless of circumstances. Their commanders made decisions based on computer analysis rather than intuition or creativity. This predictability was a weakness that humans could exploit if they could get the right information to their forces. Dr. Nathan Cross prepared the final phase of his biological warfare program with help from physicist Robert Kim and weapons specialist Tracy Bell. Their plan would turn Zephyrian technological superiority into a disadvantage by using their own communication systems against them. Robert had discovered that alien ships used quantum entanglement for instantaneous communication across vast distances. The system was faster than anything humans possessed, but it also created vulnerabilities that could be exploited with the right knowledge. Every Zephyrian ship was connected to every other ship in their fleet. Tracy developed special transmitters that could inject false data into the alien communication network. The devices would make Zephyrian computers believe they were receiving legitimate tactical information when actually they were getting carefully crafted lies designed to confuse their battle plans. The human fleet engaged the main Zephyrian force in what appeared to be a conventional space battle. Human ships attacked in formation using standard tactics, while alien forces responded with overwhelming firepower. The battle looked exactly like every previous engagement where humans had been defeated. But while the space battle drew alien attention, teams of human engineers led by Frank Davis were positioning modified asteroid mining equipment throughout the system. Frank was a civilian contractor who had spent decades moving massive rocks for mining operations. He understood how to manipulate objects in space better than any military engineer. Pilot Sharon Clark flew transport ships that appeared to be evacuating civilians from the battle zone. Sharon was young but fearless and had volunteered for the most dangerous missions of the war. Her ships carried special equipment rather than refugees, but the aliens never suspected the deception. The Zephyrian fleet followed their standard battle doctrine by concentrating their forces to deliver maximum firepower against the human formation. Their computers calculated that the battle would be over within hours as human defenses crumbled under superior alien technology. Katie Miller transmitted the final intelligence package to human forces, revealing the exact timing and positioning protocols the aliens would use. The information reached Colonel Amy Rodriguez, who was commanding ground forces on a captured asteroid base. Amy had been waiting for this moment since the war began. The human fleet suddenly broke formation and scattered in all directions, using unpredictable flight patterns that confused Zephyrian targeting computers. Instead of fighting conventionally, the humans began ramming damaged ships into alien vessels, while crews abandoned them at the last second using escape pods. Admiral Morrison led the suicide attack personally, flying his flagship directly at the largest Zephyrian battleship. His crew evacuated while Jake remained at the controls, guiding the ship toward its target. The aliens tried to destroy the human vessel, but Morrison used manual controls that could not be jammed or intercepted. The flagship explosion damaged the alien battleship and created a massive debris field that interfered with Zephyrian sensors and communications. Other human ships followed the same tactic, turning themselves into guided missiles that penetrated alien defenses through sheer determination rather than superior technology. While the space battle raged, Frank Davis activated the mining equipment that had been secretly positioned throughout the system. Massive machines designed to move asteroids began hurling rocks at the Zephyrian fleet, using trajectories calculated by civilian engineers rather than military computers. The aliens found themselves under attack from directions their tactical systems had not predicted. Rocks moving at incredible speed struck their ships while human fighters attacked from within the debris field created by the ramming attacks. The perfect Zephyrian formation began to collapse into chaos. Dr. Cross activated his final weapon by broadcasting the false tactical data through captured Zephyrian communication systems. Alien computers began receiving contradictory orders and sensor readings that made no logical sense. Fleet coordination broke down as individual ships tried to follow impossible instructions. Colonel Rodriguez led the assault on the command ship that had been weakened by the mining equipment attacks. Her soldiers used zero-gravity combat techniques, learned from years of training in impossible situations. They moved through the alien ship like ghosts, striking from unexpected directions. Lieutenant Commander Paul Turner had modified human weapons to exploit the shield frequency weaknesses he had discovered. The new guns could penetrate Zephyrian defenses, but only for brief moments when the shields rotated to different settings. Human soldiers had to time their shots perfectly, or the weapons were useless. The battle turned into exactly the kind of chaotic fight that humans excelled at while aliens struggled to understand. Zephyrian technology was designed for predictable conflicts where superior firepower determined victory. They had no framework for dealing with enemies who used desperation as a tactical advantage. Tracy Bell's false data transmissions convinced half the alien fleet that they were under attack by a much larger human force than actually existed. Zephyrian ships began firing at each other as their computers identified friendly vessels as enemy targets. The careful coordination that was their greatest strength became their weakness. Fleet Commander Vexithara watched his perfect fleet dissolve into confusion and panic as human tactics defied every principle of civilized warfare. His ships were more advanced and his weapons more powerful, but none of that mattered when the enemy refused to fight according to established rules. Amy Rodriguez captured Vexithara alive when her soldiers stormed the alien command center using tactics that seemed suicidal but worked because they were completely unexpected. The Zephyrian commander finally understood that he had been fighting an enemy whose greatest weapon was their willingness to try things that should not work. Fleet Commander Vexithara sat in the human detention facility staring at the walls of his cell. For the first time in his life, the proud Zephyrian warrior felt something he had never experienced before. Fear mixed with respect for an enemy he had completely underestimated from the beginning. Admiral Jake Morrison had survived the ramming attack by ejecting in an escape pod at the last possible moment. He now commanded the combined human and captured Zephyrian fleet that patrolled the space around Earth. Jake had learned to pilot alien ships using techniques that confused their original designers. President Amanda Foster met with Vexithara in a secure conference room deep within the detention center. Amanda wanted to understand how such an advanced civilization could make such fundamental mistakes about human nature. The conversation would determine whether the war continued or peace was possible. Vexithara looked at the human leader and finally spoke the words that had been forming in his mind since his capture. He admitted that the Zephyrian Empire had been wrong about human weakness and that their military analysts had failed to understand what they were really fighting against. Dr. Lisa Hayes now served as the chief xenodiplomatic advisor, helping both species learn to communicate without the threat of violence hanging over every conversation. Lisa had dreamed of peaceful first contact and was determined to make it happen even after everything that had occurred. The captured Zephyrian commander explained that his people had conquered dozens of worlds using the same tactics that had failed so completely against humanity. Other species had surrendered when faced with superior technology or fought using conventional methods that Zephyrian computers could easily predict and counter. Amanda Foster listened carefully as Vexithara described how alien military doctrine was based on logical analysis and technological superiority. The Zephyrians had never encountered an enemy that made decisions based on emotion and instinct, rather than calculated odds of success. Jake Morrison joined the conversation to explain human military thinking from his perspective as a soldier who had fought in the war from beginning to end. He told Vexithara that humans became more creative and determined when facing impossible odds, rather than giving up like most species. Dr. Nathan Cross presented his analysis of why human tactics had been so effective against Zephyrian forces. Nathan explained that human evolution had created a species that thrived on adversity and responded to overwhelming challenges with increased innovation rather than surrender. The biological weapons and computer viruses had worked because they exploited Zephyrian over-reliance on their technology. When their systems became unreliable, the aliens could not adapt quickly enough to continue fighting effectively. Humans had turned Zephyrian strengths into weaknesses. Vexithara admitted that his people had never considered that apparent weakness could actually be a form of strength. Human willingness to sacrifice individual lives for larger goals had seemed like primitive behavior, but it had proven to be devastatingly effective in warfare. Colonel Amy Rodriguez brought reports from the occupied worlds where human guerrilla forces continued operations even after the main war had ended. The resistance fighters were now helping to establish joint human Zephyrian administrations that respected both species' rights and customs. Engineer Carlos Martinez worked with captured Zephyrian technicians to create hybrid ships that combined the best aspects of both civilizations' technology. Carlos discovered that alien engineering was sophisticated but inflexible, while human designs were crude but adaptable to changing conditions. The first joint patrol ship launched with both human and Zephyrian crew members working together. Pilot Julie Hayes commanded the vessel using tactics that combined logical Zephyrian planning with human intuition and creativity. The combination proved more effective than either approach alone. Lieutenant Chris Johnson flew the new hybrid fighters that used Zephyrian technology, controlled by human reflexes and decision-making. The ships were faster and more powerful than anything either species had built separately while maintaining the unpredictability that had made human tactics so successful. Other alien civilizations watched the conflict between humans and Zephyrians with great interest. News of the war spread throughout the galaxy, as species that had been conquered by the Zephyrian Empire realized that the humans had accomplished something thought impossible. The Altarian Republic sent diplomatic envoys to establish relations with humanity after learning that humans had defeated the Zephyrians using inferior technology. The Altarians were traders who valued innovation and adaptability over pure technological advancement. The Vegan Federation offered military alliance with Earth after studying human tactical innovations that had revolutionized their understanding of asymmetric warfare. The Vegans were scientists who appreciated the creativity humans had shown in solving seemingly impossible problems. President Foster addressed the United Earth Assembly explaining that humanity had earned its place in the galactic community through determination and sacrifice rather than technological superiority. The war had changed how other species viewed humans and opened opportunities that had never existed before. Vexithara agreed to serve as liaison between the Zephyrian Empire and human governments, helping to establish the peace treaty that would end hostilities between their species. He understood that continued conflict would only result in more Zephyrian defeats as humans became even more creative and desperate. Dr. Cross established research partnerships with Zephyrian scientists who were fascinated by human approaches to problem solving. The aliens had always relied on logical analysis, while humans used intuition and trial and error methods that sometimes produced breakthrough discoveries. Admiral Morrison and Vexithara worked together to develop joint defense strategies for protecting both human and Zephyrian worlds from other threats that existed in the galaxy. Their combined forces used human unpredictability supported by Zephyrian technology and resources. The war had taught both species valuable lessons about the nature of strength and weakness. Humans learned that their apparent disadvantages could become advantages when used creatively. Zephyrians learned that technological superiority meant nothing without the wisdom to use it properly. Children from both species began studying together at joint educational facilities established on neutral worlds. Human children learned Zephyrian science and mathematics, while alien children studied human history and creative thinking methods. Engineer Samantha Lee designed the first permanent space station jointly operated by humans and Zephyrians. The facility served as a symbol of cooperation between former enemies who had learned to respect each other through conflict and understanding. The galaxy was changing as other species realized that the age of conquest through technological superiority was ending. Humans had proven that determination and creativity could overcome any advantage if applied with sufficient intelligence and courage. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship watching human and Zephyrian ships patrol together through space. He thought about the long journey from first contact disaster to mutual respect and partnership. The aliens had learned that humans were not weak, and humans had learned that they were stronger than they had ever imagined. The war was over, but the alliance between humans and Zephyrians would last for generations, as both species explored the galaxy together, using the best qualities each had to offer.